Welcome to careful consideration of our common concerns. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Does that look good? Yeah. Okay. Welcome. Does my hair look okay to you guys? Good. Now, we have, shall we say, an interesting election out here. And one of my hard left friends, yes, I do have such, sent me a text celebrating my horrendous defeat. And I sent back to him a text that said, not so fast. Get your popcorn out. This movie's not over. Now, I'm not going to try to predict what will happen. My task here today is to tell you what can happen. And the first thing I want to do is to point out that, in fact, there is a statute that governs how all of this works, and it is 3 U.S.C.E., and it's sections 1 through 19 or 20, but it's Title 3. And basically, it has a pot full of rules and regulations on how everything happens. And I'm not going to go through all of that right now. The first thing is Donald Trump is giving valid claims that there is fraud. And as we look at it, I mean, there's a pot full of things. For example, and I've just made a list here, and if you want to look at it, I mean, that's a whole page full of list of things. And the issue here at hand is, can we get every legal vote to count? And this is very, very important. The Democrats want every vote to count. They're assuming that every vote, including all of the fraudulent ones they create, is necessary to count. But the fact is that under law, only the legal votes count. And a legal vote is one that is cast by an eligible voter who is properly registered, who casts his vote on time in the manner prescribed by law. If you don't do any of those things, it's not a valid vote. And I don't care how much you yell, it should not be counted. And if we take the time to look at hang on a second, here we go, a page titled Every Legal Vote. This really outlines the issues here. And it says everylegalvote.com, and when we go down and look at the whole country, you can look at how the map sets out. We have purple, which is Maine and Nebraska. Those states split their votes by congressional district. That's why they're purple. The blue ones are the ones that clearly were won by the Democrats. The red ones were clearly won by the Republicans. And then you have these orange ones where they haven't been settled and where we have fraud. Those are Georgia, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona. That's a whole bunch. And the current status, if we look at it, and that's interesting, this has changed since I last looked at it, because of a couple of votes being thrown back into the we don't know category, Donald Trump actually has a slight lead. But if we count them the way the Democrats want us to count them, look what you get. You get 306 votes. That's more than 270 for Biden, 234 for Trump. If we take the fraud out, it goes the other way, 305 for Trump and 233 for Biden. So you can see that this is a very, very important issue. Now, when we look at it, what are the issues involved? And there are 1,000 different things that we can look at. I'm just going to run the list. We have undervotes. An undervote is defined as where you have somebody at the top of the ticket who has a vote. Biden gets a vote, Trump gets a vote, one of the two. And then there are no votes below it. And I'll give you an example of what would be counted as an undervote where I vote. we had a bunch of judicial elections, and most people don't know squat about the judges, and they just leave them blank. Those are undervotes. We voted for somebody above them on the ticket, but we didn't vote for judges. Well, in the presidential race, it's did you vote for Biden and nobody else? Or did you vote for Trump and nobody else? And when we look at the undervotes are insanely large. For example, as of 2 days ago in Michigan, we had 7,000 Trump undervotes and 69,000 Biden undervotes. Now, ordinarily, they would be roughly the same. And if you look in uncontested states, Ohio, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Colorado, you run through the list, the Biden undervotes are roughly the same as the Trump undervotes. They're not in those contested states. If we look at late ballots, Pennsylvania is the obvious ones. You have ballots that arrived after the designated cutoff. They have been counted in spite of the Supreme Court saying do not count them twice. They've been counting them anyway. Ballots that don't arrive on time, I'm sorry, those are not valid ballots. We have unverified ballots. Let's say I get an absentee ballot with no signature on it, no date, no witness, no nothing, none of the things depending on the state that's required for that one. In that case, I get an unverified ballot, which frankly is not a vote. And there are huge numbers of these unverified ballots that have been counted for Joe Biden. We have all of the reporting on observers who've been kept out. I'm not going to crank across all of the details there, but what I will do is to point out that we have a huge number of ballots that are just out there where nobody could verify what was going on. And if you're not trying to commit fraud, why do you want to keep out Republicans? Why do you want to put covers on the windows so Republicans can't take pictures through the windows? Yeah. Okay, and the next one we wanted to look at is that we have machines, that is computers, changing ballots. And let's take a good look at what the Gateway Pundit has found, and this has been posted in a number of different areas. Notice it says analysis of election night data from all states shows millions of votes either switched from President Trump to Biden or were lost. Now, this comes from the Dominion software system and some others. Dominion software ran the voting machine software in Michigan, and there was a county race that got switched. 5,000 votes went to the Democrat that should have gone to the Republican, and it was a computer code item that did this. When they rechecked by hand, the Republican won. But now here we go, and let's look down, and we'll just skip down to the table here. And we notice, well, on the way down, that Wisconsin had the same problem. But let's look at the table. And here is a chart showing lists. Now, by the way, the original computer geek who did this, and he used a technique called scraping, where he was able to scrape the code from the various sources all around the country. And he even identified the lines of code where this changed. And we look in Pennsylvania, there were 221,000 roughly votes that got switched from Trump to Biden. That's already as much as the entire win in Pennsylvania. But notice, 940,000 votes were just lost. They simply vanished. That's a total of over 1.1 million votes just in Pennsylvania. If we go down to, let's sneak on down to, now Nevada didn't have that particular problem. There were other issues. But if we look at Wisconsin, we have about 5,000 votes that problem was involved in. There are other things going on. So there we have problems there. We have issues where workers were marking ballots. We have video of that going on. We have machines that were set up to automatically say the signatures match when they didn't. In Pennsylvania, we have a vast number of ballots, absentee ballots, recorded as being received and voted the day before they were sent out. We have some on similar number on the day that they were sent out, and a bunch more on the day that after they were sent out. Now, unless the mail service in Pennsylvania works different than where I am, if I put something in the mail today, it doesn't go out, get marked, and come back so that I get it tomorrow. That's not happening. We have 14,000 dead people voted in Detroit. We have 21,000 in Philly. And then there's an interesting thing. There were several states that at midnight suddenly stopped counting votes. And at 4 a.m., they started counting again. And all of a sudden, you got a huge number of votes that came in 100% for Joe Biden, not one vote for Trump. That's fraud on its face. So let's kind of go through here. One more item. Benford's law is something we do need to look at very briefly. And Benford's law, if you look at it, is used as a common tool in fraud research. And the fraud investigators will use it because it turns out that people who try to commit fraud aren't able to manage to make all of the numbers fit Benford's law. And, this is the normal distribution of where the first digit will land. And I'm not going to go through that math. It's been a lot of years since I did anything quite like that. But when you go through and then they show some samples and whatnot, basically Benford's law is a standard technique for identifying fraud, and everything in all of these states fails Benford's law. Now, the question is, what's going to happen? And the answer is, I don't know. But there are a number of things going on. The states are required ultimately to certify the election. Georgia has said, we aren't doing it until we have a paper ballot audit because they believe there's a lot of problems there. That was the Secretary of State did it. Pennsylvania Secretary of State ain't going to do it. So what happens? The Speaker of the House got up today and said, without an audit, we're not going to certify the vote. Now, what would happen if the Secretary of State refused to allow an audit? At that point, remember, and this is where we go and we take a look at Title III. And let's just kind of skip over here. We'll go back. Ultimately, well, we'll just leave it on this one. Ultimately, you count the votes in Congress, but early along in Title III, there are provisions that say the state legislature has control. And in Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, we have Republicans in charge of both houses of the legislature. So the Democrats can scream and yell, but they can't actually change anything. Now, if those legislatures get big brass ones and say, look, we've been defrauded in the vote count, we don't know all the details, we are certifying our vote for Donald Trump, count on it, there will be hell. And Trump will have to call out, every state will have to call out the National Guard. If they don't, Trump will, to quell the violence. But that's the way it is. The left is the violent side. But the states can certify for Trump. If they do, that's the best answer. But what happens as it goes through the courts and you have all these challenges? A lot of the lower courts are going to say, no, go away. Some of the appellate courts are going to say, no, go away. Count on it. This thing is going to hit the U.S. Supreme Court. It is going to happen. There is no doubt in my mind it will hit the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court will, in the language of Amy Coney Barrett, look at this as a political process. Now, it has been criminally tampered with. But what they will want to do is find an answer that is the least political of all. And they have several choices in how they go about this. One is they can look at Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Madison, Wisconsin, Lansing, Michigan, or Detroit, actually, Detroit, Michigan, Las Vegas, Nevada, that's Clark County, and Phoenix, Arizona, those areas, Maricopa County, and they can say those votes are irreparably tainted by fraud. Okay? Irreparably is a legal term that says something was done wrong and there's no way to fix it. I can't say, oh, you took that ballot out of the envelope, you put the envelope with the name on it over on the left-hand table, and you put the other ballot on the right-hand table, and I can say, oh, if I'm counting the ballots, I go, oops, that's an oops. I can pick the two up off the top of the stack, put them back together. That way I've repaired the error. But if I take that and I put them over there and pile more on top and just keep going and going and going, I now have an irreparable spoliation of evidence. Now, spoliation is a term which refers to we have plundered the evidence in such a way that there's no way to get it back to anything that's vaguely resembling normal. We cannot repair it. It's completely gone. And in court, the judges are entitled to take those who spoliate, those who taint evidence, and hold it against them. And since these are votes, if it's the Democrats doing it, the Supreme Court can very well say, you did it, these areas are gone. But what they might say is that all of the vote from that state is tainted. We can't resolve that here. All of the details haven't been worked out. We're on a hard constitutional calendar. We're going to send it back to your state legislature, and the state legislature will have to do it. In my mind, that is the least political answer. But given that all 5 of those states are run by by Republicans, I would think that the proper answer would be send it to the states. That's the least political answer. The other answer, which is maybe not so political, would be to say, look, those states cannot send electoral votes because their vote is irreparably tainted. And as a result, nobody gets 270 votes. But there's a little legality in there. They have to answer the question of how many votes are there, because when you take all of those out, those are all Trump votes that go away. Biden will actually look like he's got more than Trump. And you just simply have to say, no, there have to be 270 votes because that's what's designated, and we're not going to allow that to be. In which case, because when the Electoral College votes, it has an incomplete vote, it now goes to the House of Representatives. In the House of Representatives, each state gets 1 vote, and since Republicans control 26 state delegations, and there are only 50, Republicans will win. Donald Trump will be re-elected president. Now, I suspect that the Supreme Court could do that, but I think it's more likely they send it back to the state legislatures because each of those state legislatures is a little closer to home and a little more likely to be responsive to their voter base. And as a result, the Supreme Court is saying, we're washing our hands of this thing. It's not our problem, but you got to fix it. Here is a huge fraud. You have to fix it. And then we find out if those legislatures have the brass ones to do the right thing. It could go either way. And as a result, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what's going to happen. I'm not going to tell you how the Supreme Court is going to rule. And in Article 2, Section 1, Paragraph 2, it says, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors. Okay? And then it goes on to say that it's the sum of the senators and congressmen. As the legislature may direct. In other words, when Tom Feeney called the Florida legislature into session to settle the problem under Bush v. Gore, Tom Feeney had absolute right to do what he did, and the answer could not be challenged in any arena. So let's hope they do it, but that's where it's likely to go. There are so many twists and turns in this, God only knows what will actually happen. I'm just talking about what should happen. Until next time, take a look at those links below. Join me on MeWe or on Parlay, the new non-censoring, non-tracking versions of Facebook and Twitter. But if you must use the old left-wing censoring versions, we're still on Facebook and at VidZet on Twitter. The message is what matters. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Thanks for watching.